Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Patient Perspective series. We really are thrilled that you're here with us today. I'm going to be introducing our two speakers today in just a moment. It's Julia Walsh and her husband, John Walsh. But before I do, I want to make an observation. Just came to me in the last 24 hours. And the observation is how many people behind the scenes for an event like this, and particularly this one, have a cancer diagnosis. Not only a cancer diagnosis, a lot of them, and some of them, I know you're in the room today, some of them have advanced cancer diagnoses. They're currently in treatment. And you're an inspiration to all of us that you still put the face on cancer survivorship for all of us. It's thank you, and thank you for your contribution. Next, before we begin, for those of you who did not notice, there's a table outside in addition to the check-in table. And I say those of you who are here in the room because we do have a remote audience today. The table is the All of Us Research Program. If you are unfamiliar, this is an NIH program. They are enrolling 1 million people in the US in 10 years. It started in 2018. They're right on track in terms of numbers. And it's a giant database that the goal is to advance precision medicine, particularly for those in underrepresented populations. My family is enrolled. I encourage you get your DNA in this study, in this program. So you can get information right outside and you can do all of the necessary things right here on the HSC campus. So if you happen to be here, it's very convenient for you. Today we're going to be in conversation. We have Julia and John speaking to us, and I'm going to read you their resume or their bios in just a second. But I do want to talk for a second about how we met. Actually, Julia and John reached out to me because they had been to Costa Rica, which I suspect you're going to hear about in a second. But they had met someone there, a cancer survivor and amazing artist who's written a book, and I hope you talk about this. That because of Julia and John, we're going to be able to give out a number of these for free to cancer patients here at USC in the foreseeable future. So I'm really excited about that. And already you've contributed to the patients here. So thank you so much for that. We'll be speaking for the better part of an hour. We'll stop if you have some questions. Love to field those questions from you. And then we are having a book raffle, and you probably saw this if you saw the flyer. And it's Ikigai. And I chose this book at first. First, you have to read it, too, because you're really going to get a lot out of it. We're raffling off 10 copies today. But on Amazon, it got 54,000 reviews. So this is an international bestseller, almost 5 stars. So if you don't win one today, you might check it out anyway. So we'll be doing that at the very end. So thank you so much. One last thing, I'm going to be talking about you now. Julia Walsh is an attorney and lecturer at the USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. She was involved in cancer research prior to attending law school at USC and has a long history of advocacy on a variety of issues, including disability, health, children's issues, and education. Julia was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia in 2013 and received her first line of treatment through a clinical trial from 2016 to 2019. In her free time, Julia enjoys mentoring newly diagnosed cancer patients and helping patients navigate the healthcare system and insurance issues. I already have a lot of questions for you. So, okay, John Walsh is the Assistant Dean of Education in the USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology and has been an award-winning member of the faculty at USC for 33 years. John received his PhD in physiology and biomedical sciences from the University of Texas School of Medicine in Houston. His research interests have included age-related diseases in the brain, including Parkinson's and the effect of exercise on the brain. John enjoys making complex scientific topics accessible and easy to understand for his undergraduate students and teaches one of the most popular general education science classes at USC. John spends his free time surfing, and I went on YouTube, and he does, and it's amazing. You have to check him out. And being a top-notch caregiver for Julia. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Please welcome them, Julia and John Walsh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Again, and I want to thank Mary for inviting us, and I really love this format. We're not talking at you or to you. We're talking with you this way, and we're open to any questions afterwards. And I'm going to let my beautiful wife start the process, and
he's going to let me be in charge.
That's
he's
right.
Smart.
That's right.
So I have notes because I have a touch of the chemo brain, even though I've never had chemo. Some of the other treatments have, sometimes they make you just cognitively a little bit forgetful. So I'm probably okay. But just to give you a roadmap of what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about my cancer story, what happened with me, how we can learn from it. John's story being a caregiver, and he is the best caregiver ever. My experience being a clinical trial patient, insurance, financial issues, how to navigate that system, which is hard for a lot of us, and support groups and how we can build our team and get support and learn from each other. And one of the things I think is so magical about this series, and that I think Mary's doing such an amazing job, is bringing together cancer patients who are actively in treatment, cancer survivors, healthcare workers, researchers, staff people, support people, getting us all in one room and we can all learn from each other. And I just think that's really special. And I really commend Mary and Norris for doing this. It's really, really remarkable. Okay, so to tell my story, Mary suggested that I tell you what I was doing before I got diagnosed. I was a mom with 2 kids, married, working, kind of started to feel like things weren't quite right. I had some fatigue. My kids were middle school and high school, so they would get sick, bring germs home. I would get sick. I'd be sick a little longer and sick a little worse than they were. So I was going to doctors to try to explore what was happening, and got diagnosed with a couple autoimmune issues, got treated for those. Still wasn't feeling better, wasn't feeling good. And my husband used to say, you used to be a force of nature, Julia, and you're not anymore. So I was tired, and he'd come home from work and I'd be face down on the couch asleep and there'd be no dinner ready. And that wasn't like me. And bizarrely, because I have a leukemia that also behaves like a lymphoma, I went for a routine colonoscopy. I almost canceled it, but I'd had a friend with colon cancer who was diagnosed late stage colon cancer who'd passed away. And I was like, you know what? Bill would want me to do this. I'm going to go. I go have my colonoscopy. The doctor says, we'll get the results back in 7 to 10 days. We'll give you a call. 7 to 10 days goes by, no results. Maybe 2 weeks go by. I'm starting to get a little nervous. Doctor's office calls me and says, we want you to come in. So I know probably not going to be good news. They usually don't bring you in to give you good news.
That's not the call anyone
yeah. So
wanted to hear when you got that call.
So I went in, and my gastroenterologist was beside himself because he felt like, have I missed something? What's going on? How did you have this thing? What had happened when he did the colonoscopy is he saw a little growth that was the size of the tip of a sharpened pencil, and he biopsied it. So I think 99 doctors out of 100 probably would have missed it, and he's just that good. And he said, I've never seen this. I've talked to every doctor in my practice. We've never seen this. You have leukemia in your colon, and this is unheard of. It's extranodal disease is what they call it. So typically with my diagnosis, my disease would sit in my blood, my spleen, my bone marrow, my lymph nodes. So to have it outside of those compartments is really, really weird. So he referred me to another doctor. They got kind of spooked because they said, you have this in your colon. That's not where it's supposed to be. You might have a much more aggressive disease. We're going to run a PET scan. And during that period of time, I started to, freak out as we do. We get bad news. We're like, I'm going to die. But then I started pretty quickly moving to research mode, because that's who I am. I'm a little bit of a data nerd. So I started researching my disease, trying to learn about it, trying to figure out who the specialists were, where the best doctors were. And I ended up getting a second opinion at a major academic medical center with a doctor that only sees people with my diagnosis all day long, every day.
And that's UCSD, Moore's Cancer Center down in San Diego.
So I went to him, and that was the best decision I ever made. Now, years later, I found out there's research studies that show that if you go to a major academic medical center when you are a cancer patient, you're going to do better and you're going to live longer because you're going to get better care. So just by making that one appointment, I improved my prognosis quite a bit. So when I went to see him, he did some more tests. You know, so because my blood is my cancer is my blood, my tests are pretty easy to do. They draw 15 tubes of blood, they run them through some machines, they come back and say, these are the characteristics. This is the flavor of your leukemia. And so that made life pretty easy in a sense that I didn't have to do a lot of painful biopsies or anything like that. Then I had a dialogue with him because I'd been on the internet researching. And I said, well, how about if we do some of these new tests that are coming out where we do like genomic profiling, next generation sequencing, you know, to really dig deep into my flavor of cancer and figure out what my mutations are. And he said, okay. And he says, well, why are you interested in that? And I said, I have two little kids. Well, not little kids, but one was 6th grade, one was 9th grade. I was like, I need to plan. I need to know what my prognosis is, how fast I'm going to progress, how serious this is. I need to be able to get things ready for my kids. Because as a cancer patient, when you get diagnosed, you think about yourself, but you think about your family and you think about the impact. For some reason, I wasn't worried about John because I figured he's, you know, I just knew him. I knew he could handle what was coming, but I worried about my children and financially how this was going to impact us and things like that.
And the knowledge is power. Right?
Knowledge is power.
When you get that genetic information, what's unique in the current era is you get the opportunity to have individualized care, individualized medicine based on your mutations. And like she said, she's a big research nerd. I am as well. We started digging in it, started becoming Google Docs and really finding out, you know, what's going on. And then lo and behold, her set of mutations would, if she had gone into the standard of care,
I would have had chemotherapy.
It
would not have worked. Yeah. So I would have had the chemo. I would have dealt with the side effects. I would have had a very short remission of a matter of maybe 2 or 3 months. And then I would have needed treatment again. And that would have been very disappointing to me.
Right.
And I would have had to deal with, you know, just not getting the right treatment for my flavor of cancer. And so that was really important information to have. And then I also knew, because I knew that my cancer was going to be a little bit more challenging to treat, and some of my mutations meant that I had higher risk disease. And just so you know, there's a happy ending. This was in 2013 and 2015, so I'm still here. But at the time, I made the mistake of going onto Google and looking at prognosis information. And my prognosis was that I had a 50-50 chance of making it 5 years. So I should have been gone a long time ago. So every day I walk around going, hey, I'm still here, I win. But the reality is what happened between 2013 and now, cancer research has revolutionized. The FDA has done a much better job, I think, of pushing things to market, fast-tracking drugs, getting things approved. And we're seeing advances for really hard to treat cancers, not just mine, but lung cancer and metastatic melanoma. We're seeing really great advances that are coming through the system. And so I was the beneficiary of that from my genetic testing. I knew I'm going to have a challenging cancer to treat. So and weirdly, my cancer, even though I was diagnosed for stage 4, and our joke is there is no stage 5, so stage 4, but I went into watch and wait. The benefits of treatment didn't outweigh the risks of treatment with the treatments that were available then. So my doctor said, we're going to watch you really closely. We'll see you every 3 months. We'll do blood tests. And a few years later, the wheels started to come off the bus. So I developed a complication that only, I would say, under 10 people in the US have, autoimmune neutropenia. So my body was destroying my neutrophils, which are your immune fighting cells. It's kind of your first line of defense. So
they fight off bacteria and virus. And so she started getting every bacterial and viral infection known to mankind.
Yeah, and my doctor was prescribing Neupogen, which is an injectable growth factor, works really great. I got it at my house because I got tired of driving into the infusion center. I would inject myself, my neutrophils would go up. A couple of days later, they'd start going down again. So we would do this.
Neupogen goes to your bone marrow and says, make new neutrophils, make new neutrophils. And so it was clear, her body was an experiment. It was clear that her body was making the neutrophils, but something was taking them out.
Yeah.
And it was the cancer.
Yeah,
Her
so-
cancer was autoimmune.
So we had a period of time where he said, let's run some more tests. Let's figure this out, do a bone marrow biopsy to make sure your bone marrow is working as it should. Run some tests to rule out other types of leukemias and lymphomas that could be causing this, what we call a cytopenia, low neutrophils. And at the end of the day, I love the fact that he did this. He said to me, I really don't know what to do. There's no clear standard of care because your situation is so rare, we don't have rules for it. But he said, and this is when my heart went, he said, I had your chart up this weekend and I was looking through your chart this weekend and I was talking to my colleagues around the country who were doctors about your situation to see if anyone had any ideas. And we came to the consensus that treating your cancer would treat the autoimmune problem. And my cancer had started to progress pretty rapidly at that point. So,
and his name is Dr. Michael Choi. And again,
and he's a USC grad, and that's why he's
USC
so smart.
grad, but also one of the world. He's at UC San Diego Morris Cancer Center. One of the world leaders in chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and very, very humble. And I was going to speak to this later, but right now I can just say that us bringing in the knowledge we have. I'm very interested in cancer. I've redirected a lot of my research into cancer, and he was very open to having grand rounds with us. We would sit there and just discuss treatment options, and he would sit there. There were a couple of times he actually said, "You know what? That's a really good idea. Why don't we try that?"
So he's a great team member. And we do function a lot like a team. He gives me the information, we talk about it, I ask him, what do you think? And at that point, when it was time for me to start treatment, I said, well, what are my options? So he gave me 3 choices. 2 were clinical trials, 1 was standard of care. So luckily, I didn't have to make a decision that day. I was able to go home and think about it and research and talk to John, what do you think? And I ended up going into a trial that was combining 2 drugs that were already approved and on the market, but putting them together for the first time. So there were some unknowns. We didn't know if the side effects would be a lot worse than each drug taken individually. But I decided to roll the dice and went into the clinical trial, and everything worked. I mean, it was an amazing experience. My cancer responded really well. My autoimmune neutropenia responded really well. And my other autoimmune diseases that I had been diagnosed with previously, Sjogren's and things like that, also responded. So I got a 3 for 1.
Yeah, and that was one of the dialogues we had with Dr. Choi, as he was, grappling with what are we going to do. He says, if we go after your cancer, we might get a 2 for 1 on this, and that was his hope, and it really, really worked out. And I want to say also, just to pat her on the back, it's ironic when she was doing the Neupogen this was before the treatment, just to get her neutrophils back on board. It's kind of ironic, but in the
mid-80s,
late 80s, she worked in hematology oncology before she became an attorney, and she was in the laboratory that helped develop Neupogen. And then here it is, however many years later.
Life goes full circle sometimes. So
Yeah.
You never know, something you do in your 20s might help you out when you're in your 50s. So it's a great drug. I'm a big fan.
So that's just an aside. That was important to say.
So just to fast forward, my cancer is not curable yet. I think there's a lot of advances being made. There may be a cure that happens sometime within my lifetime. I'm pretty hopeful. We're getting a lot better. But I knew going into my clinical trial, I was going to get a couple of years remission, and it was amazing. It was great. So I had my treatment for 3 years. I go off treatment. I get my energy back. I tell John, I feel like I'm 20 years younger. Everything's great. And so that was how I was able to work while I was in treatment. It was really a good experience. And I'm very grateful that I was able to participate in that trial. And I'll talk a little bit more about trials later. So I had my couple years of remission, and then I'm also a big believer of making sure you log into your patient portal so that you have access to your lab test results and that you watch them. Don't panic. One bad test result is usually meaningless, but watch for patterns. So I could see some changes. My lymphocyte count was going up. My my platelets and my red blood cells were going down. And that's usually an indication of progression of disease for my type of leukemia.
What's happening is the cancer had infiltrated her bone marrow and was then crowding out the stem cells that are responsible for making new platelets and making new red blood cells. And so when she went into trial, they did, steal a little thunder. So they did, and in part of the trial, you do tests. It's a give and take. And they did a bone marrow biopsy, and her bone marrow was 70% cancer.
Before I started treatment. And then at the end, it was down to like 0.1%. Yeah. So I still had cancer left. I wasn't, no evidence of disease or, minimal residual disease negative. That was okay though. My doctor said, you know what? We've beaten the cancer into submission temporarily. Go out and live your life, be happy, and then, who knows how long you're going to be in remission.
And you kick the can down the road, and science brings forth even better treatments.
Yeah, which is true.
She didn't have to do chemo. She did targeted therapies. She did a monoclonal antibody that you do an infusion for that goes in there and selectively attacks mostly the cancer cells. No free lunch on that. And then she had a small molecule that inhibited growth mostly in the cancer cells. And now here she is. She'll talk about 6 years later. She's come out of remission, and she's using again newer approaches.
Yeah. So the science continued to progress, and I do think the science progresses rapidly for leukemia because our tumor sample is in our blood, so it's very easy for people to study our cancer in the lab. But then we can take the discoveries from leukemia and blood cancers and we can apply them to other cancers as well. So it's going to benefit everyone. But I got a few, 3.5 years, which is longer than I expected, in remission. And then this year I started to see the test results creep up. So I could see it was coming. And then this summer, because I like to be a difficult patient, I guess, I developed autoimmune hemolytic anemia. And that's when your body attacks your red blood cells. So you become very fatigued because your hemoglobin's very low. And if you've ever had low hemoglobin, you know that feeling when it gets low enough and you can just barely lift your head off the pillow. I'd be talking to John in our house and I would say, I gotta go lie down.
Yeah. So her percentage of red blood cells, the hematocrit should be between 12 and 14%. It dropped down to about 8%.
Yeah. So I was pretty fatigued, but we caught it early because I could see these changes, and I had a routine appointment coming up with my hemonc guy, and I emailed him and I said, hey, you might want to run some tests. I think something's going on. He ran a bunch of tests. While I'm sitting in the office watching my phone, the test results are coming up and I can see, okay, this looks like autoimmune hemolytic anemia. We're going to have to do something. So we started treatment for that. And then he said, your cancer is progressing rapidly. Let's just go ahead and do what we did last time. We're going to treat your cancer. It will also treat hopefully your autoimmune hemolytic anemia. We started in July, and within a month, it took about a month for the hemoglobin to get back up, but now I feel 1,000 times better. And I'm in treatment, 6 months of infusions. My last infusion will be the day after Thanksgiving.
Get to ring the bell.
Yay me. And then I'll be on an oral medication through next summer. So
and the infusion is Gazyva, and it's a monoclonal antibody against this protein that is found on the cancer's B cells, overexpressed. It's much like you have HER2 positive breast cancer, where you have this massive overexpression in the HER2 patients for breast cancer. In her type of leukemia, she has massive overexpression of what's called CD20, and this antibody latches onto CD20 and kills them off.
So Mary asked me to talk about prognosis, and I want to take just a quick minute to say my own personal view about prognosis data. Anything you look at on the internet, we're looking backwards. We can't tell what's happening in the future, so we're looking at people that were diagnosed 10 years ago or 15 years ago using older drugs, et cetera. There's a famous article written by Stephen Jay Gould called "The Median is Not the Message." So if you look at survival curves, it looks kind of like a bell curve. And there's people on the left that didn't make it very long, and there's people on the right that inexplicably make it for a long time. Stephen Jay Gould was a Harvard biologist. He was told that he was diagnosed with a very aggressive mesothelioma type cancer. He was told he had 8 months. He lived 20 years. So I don't worry so much about prognosis data And then the other thing that I think that complicates the ability even of a doctor to say this is your prognosis is that there's so many factors that go into how well you're going to do. Are you compliant with your doctor's instructions? I tell my doctor, if you want me to stand in the corner on one leg for 12 months, I will do it because I'm highly motivated.
And she was very compliant during her trial, and it was a stage 2A clinical trial, and there were 36 patients, and in the end, maybe 16 stayed on board for the 3 years. And so it started with the monoclonal antibody, the same one she's finishing now, Gazyva. The other one was a target molecule called Imbruvica or ibrutinib, and it slowed the growth of the cancer cells, but there was no free lunch. I mean, there still were side effects, and a lot of patients couldn't handle it. And she powered through it, and so she was like, in terms of that bell-shaped curve, she was compliant, and she saw it through for the 3 years.
Yeah, so following your doctor's orders, number one thing, doing what the doctor says you need to do. Making sure that you're taking care of your health in other ways. So getting your flu shot, now getting the COVID shot, doing things. We keep hand sanitizer in the car so that when we come out of the grocery store, I immediately clean my hands because I'm immunocompromised. And I don't want to get sick, especially now that I'm in treatment. I don't want to have to delay or postpone treatment because of that. People with insurance get better care, so they do better. People that go to major academic medical centers like Norris, they do better. People, just being an active, engaged, being here. The fact that if you are a patient and you are in this room, that means your prognosis is probably better because you're engaged and you're actively seeking to learn about your disease. So all of these factors help push you on the far side of the curve. So do I know how long I'm going to live? No, I don't. Do I think I'll have a normal lifespan? I'm not really sure. There's so much that could change in the future. And there's so many good treatments coming out. And right now I'm like a little frog hopscotching from one lily pad to the next lily pad to the next lily pad. So as long as I still have some potential treatments ahead of me, then I'm good. And I could very well live a pretty long time. But in the meantime, I'm just enjoying every day that comes and feeling pretty well and pretty grateful for everything that science and technology has done for me. And so that's the good news. The other thing that Mary suggested I talk about is, how has cancer changed my life? Of course, when you first get diagnosed, you're scared, you're anxious, you're worried. What is this all going to mean? You have to give yourself time to adjust, and that may not happen in a week or two. It may happen in months. It may be a year. But at the end of the day, I'm happier than I was before I was diagnosed with cancer. I don't sweat the small stuff anymore. And as the saying goes, it's all small stuff. I make sure that I spend time with people who are positive and uplifting and supportive. I shed the people who aren't.
Yes. I talked about, Nikki will remember this. I say you have to shed the assholes. Yes. And that's what it's time to do.
Shed the jerks, I think, to make this PG. But and when I go outside, I'm like, the sky is so blue. Look at that beautiful butterfly. How pretty are those flowers? I just really cherish every moment. So I feel like I'm living in the moment more. Being told that you might not have a long life gives you the motivation to really enjoy each moment a little bit more.
And it may be helping your progression. There's a whole field of medicine called psychoneuroimmunology, and we don't all, most of us don't realize all the different hormones that are being released when we're in a high stress mode that really keeps your immune system from doing what it can do to help fight your disease.
Yeah, and I am pretty motivated. My approach has always been, I want to be as healthy as possible so that when I'm in treatment, I'm as strong as I can be to withstand whatever treatment demands are going to be there. So I try to make sure that I exercise every day, that I eat healthy, mostly vegetarian, lots of fiber, get outside, do a lot of things outdoors,
Because there's a sense of when you had that cancer diagnosis and you're in treatment, that things are spiraling out of control, that you've lost control. But being able to grab hold and say, these are the things that I can control. These are the things that I can do that maybe will help me down the line and just make me live a much better life right now.
Yeah. And even on those days when I'm really fatigued, and I talk to a lot of cancer patients with my diagnosis, and they say, I'm so tired, I just can hardly get off the couch. And I say, I know it sounds counterintuitive. Don't hate me for saying this. Try just to walk. Try some mild exercise. If you can get out and walk to the end of the street and back, you're going to feel better. So even though, and trust me, there's days when I take a nap. If you need a nap, you need a nap. If you know, you know. But having a little bit of physical activity can give you a little more energy when you think I'm too tired to do anything right now.
And there's all the wellness research. I know it's very cliche. Everybody's into wellness now, but people for years, I did exercise research for years for Parkinson's, and exercise stimulates the immune system. Having a healthy diet that has lots of antioxidants and fruits and vegetables stimulates the immune system. And that's your partner. Your immune system is your partner to fight your cancer.
Absolutely. So I want to keep moving because we're going to run out of time, because we could basically talk for like 7 days straight. But you guys probably have things to do. I want to talk to John about being a caregiver and how did it affect you to have me, your wife, the mother of your kids, your co-instructor. How did it affect you to have me diagnosed with this illness?
So, I mean, you go into shock, and you're like, oh God, I've relied on this person, my whole world.
Oh, honey. This is what he does. He's Irish, and his mom used to say the Irish have their bladders behind their eyes because he cries, and it's what I love about him so much.
Anyway, so so you have to regroup. You go into shock. You go through DABDA, which is the whole series of grief that we talk about a lot in the field of gerontology, and you're scared, and then you just got to purposeful say, okay, I'm on board, and then you have to adjust your kind of expectations of your social circle, and that was hard to do because I'm really social, and I really like hanging out with my friends, and we had to compress that because she was high risk. She was getting infected during COVID, recovering from COVID. People are like, let's get back together again. It was just like,
During the pandemic, it was a hard time because people with my diagnosis had a mortality rate if they got infected with COVID pre-vaccine of like 30 to 50%. So I said to John, look, if someone told you if you leave the house, you have a 50-50 chance of dying, would you do it?
Right.
So we were pretty locked down for a while. Now we're not. We've been to a baby shower and a wedding reception and dinner with students, and things are good now. I've been vaccinated 1 million times. So,
but you redirect your purpose, and so I had an NIH grant, and I just I had a lab for many years, and I just kind of said, what, I've given my blood to USC, and this is more important, and I attend every single doctor visit with her, every infusion. She needs me to be there for the infusion because they give her medicines that will, like Zyrtec and Benadryl, that will reduce the allergy, and we got to drive all the way back to San Diego. She sleeps oftentimes on the way back from San Diego, and and it was, things, you feel guilty because, selfishly, I'm like, God, I really want to hang out with my buddies today, but then you have to recalibrate, and it's like, but this is really important, and you're having this conflict, going on in your head, I can't be selfish right now, but then the waves are really good today, and I want to go surfing, and it's just, but then, I got to bring it back in, and so this is, it is, and it's okay.
I will admit, I probably went a little overboard for a while, and he was surfing, and he's like, Julie, I'm pretty sure that surfing is safe during COVID. And I'm like, well, are you 6 feet apart? What if someone sneezes on you?
we didn't know, but
I'm a lot more relaxed now than I was then.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, my specialty is the nervous system, and I've done research forever, and I teach classes in neuroscience, and I've taught this class for many years that was about the different physiological aspects of aging, and I would touch on the respiratory system, cardiovascular, thyroid, on and on and on. And I didn't know that much about cancer, and so much like she talked about for herself, I decided I need to become an expert. And so I redirected my course. So now my undergrads that are pre-meds come out of my class, I would say, even equally tooled as medical students here. My classes are very clinical. I teach my students about the generics of cancer, where this is how the etiology, these are the state-of-the-art diagnostics, this is the standard of care, these are all the clinical trials that are ongoing, how the clinical trial process works, and then we have a section that after Thanksgiving she comes and talks, where we have a whole hematology oncology section in this class.
So they present my blood work,
right.
and then the students really light up, because
Right.
when you're an undergraduate student, you may not have that much exposure to patients. And so I get to come into the class and they can ask me what it's like to be a cancer patient, and they're putting a face on, the clinical issues
Right.
that they're studying. And so, and we've had some students contact us later and say, I'm in medical school now, and I'm applying to be a hemonc. That's the field I want to go
that's
into,
the residency
and
they're going into,
so that's
yeah.
exciting for me.
Yeah, and I had to, your social situation changes, and all of you are. This is part of cancer support group, and so we got together and became friends with these new people that were the chronic lymphocytic leukemia support group that's resides here in Southern California, and I had to make time to go to support group meetings with her, and these meetings were invaluable because these are people in the trenches, all right? So they've been there, they fully understand what everybody's going through, and they had their finger on the pulse of you want to go to this facility or that facility. Oftentimes people would move to Bethesda, Maryland to get the best clinical trial, and they would say, people would say, well, I'm getting this treatment, and somebody would say, no, that's not the greatest treatment right now. Look into this treatment. And so there was, the patient resource was really information.
So the
information
support
was
groups,
amazing.
I think, when you hear the term support groups for cancer patients, you think, oh, I'm going to go and it's going to be all woo-woo and we're going to talk about our feelings. But what really happens, and yes, we do talk about our feelings sometimes, but what really happens with the support groups I've been to is we talk about what are the new drugs that are coming out? What are the new clinical trials that are recruiting? What side effects are people having, and how do we manage them? Who are the doctors in our field that are seeing patients with our diagnosis? And so when I got sick this summer, I fired off an email to some of the people who, I'm a 10-year survivor, they're 20-year survivors. And I said, hey, have you ever had autoimmune hemolytic anemia? What happened? What tests did your doctor run? What did you do? What was your treatment? How did it work out for you? And they answered me within an hour. So that was a really great resource for me to just get my head around what was happening and how it was going to go, and what the possible treatments were. So I'm a big fan of support groups. You can do them. The one that I go to meets via Zoom still. There's stuff online. Be careful when you go online. Go to a reputable source. American Cancer Society. Every cancer has its own little group, like Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, or I'm sure there's one for every cancer that we can think of. And so they will connect you with these support groups that are online. Just be careful. What you hear on the internet isn't always true.
There are a lot of charlatans.
Run everything by your doctor.
They're going to be pushing nutritional supplements.
Yeah. So
and
there's
yes,
some bad stuff out there.
I say, changing your diet is important. We exercise together. We eat mostly vegetarian, but we don't turn back from what the doctors tell us to do in terms of treating your cancer. You're going to go with the experts on that.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many of my friends say, you don't need to be doing, therapy from a medical center. Just eat more garlic.
I love garlic, so I'm like, yes, thank you for that recommendation. I love garlic.
Right. And
so,
the other things that we do is we do things like this, where we go to meetings of groups. you get really cool bling. So I'm right here. I'm wearing my hematology oncology. I mean my
Leukemia and Lymphoma
Lymphoma
Society
Society shirt. So we go to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society meetings, and they have lots of bling. They have lunch. Coming to this is bling from this meeting right here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
And this is a real powerful book, and we all have purpose. This is all about living life with a sense of purpose, the Ikigai, and I hope I said that right. I'm not sure, we woke up this morning and this is what we're doing. This gave us a real sense of purpose, and every day it's a new sense of purpose. But you just come up and you have purpose in your life. It's been a journey for me, and I just had to really. I have the luxury of having the kind of job where I was able to adjust my hours and redirect my life, and not everybody has that luxury. But it's been a lot more powerful to have both Julia and I present for the visits with her hematologist oncologist.
Absolutely, yeah. If you can get someone to go with you when you go to your doctor visits, it's very helpful. You can compare notes afterwards, and I know for healthcare practitioners, electronic health records are a pain in the butt. But for me, I can go on later and I can say, what did the doctor say about this? Okay, I look in my notes and it says you're supposed to do this, 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 and this, and it's very clear and great. I think
it's time for you to talk about insurance.
Yes, exactly. I want to talk a little bit about cancer and financial issues because we have what we call financial toxicity for cancer patients, and I'm passionate about this because I think that people are sometimes not able to get the treatments that they should be getting when they should be getting them in a prompt way because we have roadblocks set up. So in my case, I have employer-provided insurance. It's the most expensive insurance we can get. Generous benefits. But I'm dealing with my insurance company. I'm dealing with the pharmacy benefit manager who controls my drug.
It's called
and I'm dealing
for
and I'm dealing with the specialty pharmacy. Now, one thing I've learned, not just dealing with my issues, but his brother is a Medicare patient, so I've handled his insurance problems. Put things in writing when you can. So make sure you have, if you can, do an online patient portal, send messages in writing so that they, as opposed to calling someone on the phone, keep a little notebook where you keep notes. If you do talk to people on the phone, the day, the time, when you talk to them, what they said they were going to do. And I've been laughing a little bit. When I was in the clinical trial, everything was so easy. They would deliver my drugs to me. The drugs were free. Life was good. Now I have to get my insurance to approve my drugs, which are $12,000 a month. I pay $0. Okay. So I have to get the insurance to approve this every month. I call up the specialty pharmacy. I am sometimes on the phone for 2 to 3 hours. Luckily, I have the kind of job where I can do that. For people who are working at Target, you can't be on the phone for 2 hours while you're manning the cash register at Target. But I have learned with the specialty pharmacy, you tell them, they come back and they say, well, there's a note in your file that we can't fill your drug because you need prior authorization. I say, nope, we've already gotten prior authorization 3 times for this dose level of this drug. You put me on hold, you call the insurance company and you get this cleared up. Don't let them hang up on you. Keep the phone call going. And then they come back and they say, well, you need to do this. Okay, put me on hold, call the insurance company, call the pharmacy benefit manager, call the doctor's office, and make sure that they get things done, because otherwise a note goes into your file and maybe no one looks at it. And then you're waiting and your drug doesn't come on time. The other thing I do is, if I can call to start working on my refills 2 weeks before the refill is maybe needed, I call 2 weeks before, because it might take me 2 weeks to resolve all of the issues. When I was in the clinical trial, my doctor was sending the paperwork for the clinical trial to the prior authorization department, and they would lose it. So he would send it again, and they would lose it, and he would send it again.
This is the most expensive PPO USAS.
He sent the paperwork 5 times, and they lost it. So I said, you know what? I'm lucky I have employer-provided insurance. I email the person in charge of benefits at my employer, and I said, hey, I'm going to get this drug one way or the other. If I'm in the clinical trial, I'm going to get the drug that costs $140,000 a year for 3 years for free. If you won't approve the clinical trial, you're going to have to pay $140,000 a year forever, because I'm not going to get the other treatment that would help me go, not be on the treatment forever. So your choice. I don't care. You tell me what you want to do. My clinical trial was approved the next day because I was able to motivate them financially. They understood that it was in their best interest to make sure this went through.
So you have to be a bulldog, is what you're hearing about this. And it's really a shame that to get good healthcare that you've paid your entire life for, you have to be an attorney.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you're a Medicare patient, there are 5 levels of Medicare appeal. The first one's usually pretty easy. With my brother-in-law, when I'm handling his appeals, first I send an email, nice, polite, chatty email. Hey, you didn't approve this, or you didn't pay for this. You really should, and here's why. But there's usually, for example, he has a Medicare Advantage plan. On the plan, you can go on the website, log into his account, get the Medicare appeal form, and fill it out online and send it in. So just be aware, there's a solution for every problem if you're having trouble getting care approved and getting your treatment approved. Now, if you're at a place like Norris, they have staff here that can help as well. And then even outside of Norris, if you have financial issues paying for treatment, there are copay assistance programs. If you're not on Medicare, you can get copay assistance from drug manufacturers. So I'm paying $0 because the drug manufacturer is picking up the balance.
So when you go to the drug manufacturer's website, you hunt around on the tabs on top of the website, and you will find this copay assistance programs. A lot of people don't realize that it's there, and it'll save you, $100,000 maybe over the term of your.
And then there are a lot of nonprofits that provide financial assistance to people on Medicare. So my dad was a lung cancer patient, and he developed autoimmune thrombocytopenia, low platelets. And I was able to get a drug for him that would have cost $6,000 a month. I was able to get it for him for free by going to the manufacturer of the drug, finding the nonprofit association that would fund the drug, filling out the forms, and all of this can be done online. So it helps to be computer savvy or to have a friend that's computer savvy. And so there's nonprofits that will support cancer patients. They'll pay for your transportation. They'll pay for your living expenses if you're having trouble making your rent or buying groceries because you're in treatment and maybe you're not able to work full time. They will pay for your drug expenses, so co-pays, things like that. And the other good news, because it's not all sad, the other good news is that the law has changed so that for people who are on Medicare, next year, the maximum out of pocket for your drugs, if you have Medicare Part D, is $3,250. The year after that, it's $2,000. So we're getting some help for people on Medicare for drug costs, which has been a huge impediment. As we move from chemotherapy to targeted oral medications, we have moved into a time when we're dealing with more financial issues because it's covered under a different part of Medicare.
Oftentimes, the typical drug will cost $150,000 a year because it's modern therapy targeted, and the R&D, that goes into these clinical trials costs, even billions of dollars, and so the companies are trying to recoup their R&D costs. So, and the other thing that is different now too is it's very political, and the Affordable Care Act, and I'm opening this up, but the Affordable Care Act changed everything. So before the Affordable Care Act was passed as law, we had an annual maximum that she would have exceeded the first
pretty quickly,
in her clinical trial, and then it would have been out of pocket. So I think our annual maximum was $250,000 a year with my USC PPO. That first year was close to $400,000 for her. So we would have had to have sold assets to pay for her cancer treatment, but the Affordable Care Act made that illegal. She would have been potentially kicked off of our insurance. Affordable Care Act made that illegal. We had a lifetime maximum of.
It was like $1 to $2 million. So I would have blown through that by now for sure. She would have blown through that as well. So she wrote a letter to President Obama thanking him, and she gets a phone call from the head press secretary. He says, President Obama wants to talk. Read your letter. I thought my friends were pranking me because I get a message. This was weird. They call we still had a landline back then. They call and leave a message on my phone machine saying, this is the White House calling. We want to use your email that you wrote, the White House, in a speech. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. That must be a scam. And then they called my cell phone, and I thought, wait a minute, I didn't give them my cell phone number. But they're the government, they know. So he called and he said, no, really, we really are the White House. And so we have a video where
it's on YouTube.
The president says, and Julia Walsh from California.
No, what was beautiful about it is President Obama didn't change a word of her letter. He verbatim read everything that she had said, and it was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's, I think we've covered everything, Mary. Do people have questions, or do you
have anything else?
Okay, because this is my style, I did not mention to the remote audience that Q&A is disabled and you can use chat to pose questions, but I still got one anyway, so yay. And also in the room, if someone in the room has questions, I'll run over to you with this mic I'm going to turn on. I hope. There we go. Okay, so here's a question for you from our remote audience. Please discuss when, if stage 4 cancer patients can receive SSI disability. My sister is living with stage 4 colon cancer, now 5 years, exclamation point. And she only found out about this benefit last year. So thankfully she was granted SSI and received 1 year back pay. And it has been a lifesaver for her and her family.
This is a really good question. I teach about Social Security and Social Security disability. So many people who apply for Social Security disability get turned down right out of the blocks. There's a book called the Social Security Blue Book, and that lists diagnosis. It's online. It lists for every cancer diagnosis, there's a different standard for what you need to meet to get disability. You have to be disabled for 6 months to start getting payments, but it usually can take 3 to 5 months to get approved. So I tell people, if you get your diagnosis, start applying. Go find the Blue Book. You might need an attorney, but go find the Blue Book. And the Blue Book will say, these are the tests that they need to see in your file to approve your claim. So if you can give them what they want, you're much more likely to get approved straight out of the block. So for a patient like me, I am not eligible for Social Security disability unless I fit into really specific circumstances where I've either had a bone marrow or stem cell transplant, or I've failed, multiple therapies in a year. But so for every cancer diagnosis, it's going to be a little bit different. But that's a great question. And then, once you get on Social Security disability, if you're under 65, after 2 years of being on Social Security disability, you're eligible for Medicare. So that helps a lot too if you're not working and you're trying to afford health insurance.
And there are programs all around the country that are producing graduates that specialize in patient advocacy. And so if you find this too difficult to deal with on your own, you can seek help through these patient advocacy groups.
Great. Yes. You have.
So I wanted to know what would you say to a patient or a caregiver who's just kind of fed up with the bureaucracy of trying to advocate for treatments and trying to get those authorizations and everything, and they just feel like they just want to kind of give up.
And I totally get that. And we all have those days where we just say, I can't do this anymore. It helps to have a caregiver like John who's supportive. I had a rough day. I think it was Sunday night. And I was like, oh man, this is really rough. I don't know about this. And John said, no, you're fine. You only have 6 more months or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was about treatment side effects. It wasn't about bureaucracy. But I think it's the same thing. You do what you can do. And then if you're fed up, put it down, give yourself a day or two, do some self-care, take a nap, go walk your dog, watch Netflix, whatever, and then come back the next day. And I think being determined is another one of those things that's going to affect your prognosis. But it takes a real team. It takes the patient working, the doctor staff, the people on the other line of the phone when you're dealing with the insurance company. But it's a huge problem, I think, for cancer patients. I had a total knee
replacement, and our insurance, after they had given me pre-approval, said we retroactively remove our pre-approval because it was robotic surgery. And then we had to lawyer up with them. And
I always say you shouldn't have to have a PhD and a law degree to get health care. It's
It's a shame.
unfortunate.
I'm just curious about how the conversation was with your children.
That's a good question too. A lot of times people ask me, who do I tell? How do I tell them? When do I tell them? We decided, and it's very specific to your family and your loved ones. One of my kids I knew would be very angry with me if I didn't tell him, the older one. And interestingly, later on, I asked them, what did I tell you that first week when I was diagnosed? They said, oh, Mom, you came home, you said, I have a touch of the cancer, everything's going to be fine. So I was a little bit over positive, but I wanted to tell them what was happening just because I knew I was going to be on the phone, making doctor appointments. I would not have been able to keep it a secret
We
from
were
them.
going to be traveling to San Diego a lot too.
But then
so.
later, after things had settled in, I sat down with both of my kids. Again, one's in high school, one's in middle school. And I said, how much do you want to know? And the older one said, I want to know everything. Don't keep anything back. My younger one said, I don't really need to know that much because it's not going to change anything.
Two different personalities.
So you just have to appreciate different personalities. I was open at work because my boss is super, super supportive. And I knew she was going to be supportive. And I knew she was going to be good with me. But a lot of people say, well, I don't want to say anything at work. Now, of course, I'm covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. As a cancer patient, I can't be discriminated against or retaliated against. That doesn't mean it won't happen. But I was very fortunate. My boss was very supportive early on when I was neutropenic. Before the pandemic, she let me teach from home one semester. I mean,
yeah, this is Maria Hankey over at
she's
the
a
Davis School of
jewel. She's an
Gerontology.
absolute
Yeah.
jewel. So I'm very lucky. And then with other people, with other family members, I told my parents. My dad was a cancer patient, so he and I were simpatico, and my mom, was a caregiver, and she actually flew out because she wanted to make sure that the infusion center was up to her high standards, which was really, really nice. And I remember she said to me, if you need anything, I'm on the next plane out.
I
And
remember
that
we knew
was
people
very
in
meaningful.
the chronic lymphocytic leukemia group that didn't want to tell anybody.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't. But for us, it was a source of support, and my neighbors and my friends rallied. So when I was in treatment getting infusions, they would pick my kids up from school or take them to school, and and that was a really, really, really helpful for us.
We're about out of time. Wonderful talk, wonderful conversation. And one last thing we need to do.
One last thing, Mary mentioned this book. Well, I have sent it. I'll send it to you again. So the artist has made available a downloadable PDF file of her beautiful work. So, and it's a really amazing guide to the journey through cancer. She also had a leukemia, even as detailed as a map done beautifully of which veins are the ones I want poked and which ones I don't want poked. And and then she, like Mary said, she's going to be receiving hard copies of this, but the PDF file for this will be made available. She has her website online is Eva Fakatselis, and she has an amazing website that talks about her journey as well. So we'll provide you with that link.
Right. If any of you have additional questions and we didn't get to them, please contact me, or you can, of course, contact the Walshes. They're very high profile, but I'd be glad to forward any questions that you might have. So we'll make that work, okay? Thanks for coming.